back in the day, there was a similar player to LeBron James, a guy who was a 12-time NBA All-Star. He could shoot free throws. He could rebound. He could hit the jump shots. He was named one of the 50 greatest players in history. We have on the line Dolph Schayes. How you doing, Dolph?
Hey, Don, this is I'm doing great, especially after that build-up. I wasn't a jump shooter in those days.
Well, you had a shot that LeBron James does not. You had the two-handed set shot.
Set shot. I drove and all that stuff, but I appreciate it, and to put me in the same category with LeBron James is really putting me on a pedestal. He's a credible athlete, and I was not as athletic as he. I was what you call a grinder, a plugger. I kept going and whatever. But thank you so much for the.
Well, you were more than just a grinder, more than just a plugger. You were one of the stars of the league in its early days.
Okay, great. Okay.
You'll accept that, won't you?
Yes.
Okay.
So you won an NBA championship. Was that the highlight of your career, or was there something else that you really think that you enjoyed more than that?
Well, when you play for 16 years, there are lots of highlights. Of course, winning a championship was a major highlight. Being picked, let's say, the one of the top 50 players was certainly unexpected and a terrific day, not only for myself and my family, and my kids and grandchildren were grown at that time, so it was big time. But I had many highlights. First All-Star game played in 1951. Making that was really a big thrill at that time. Coaching the Sixers with Chamberlain and Hal Greer and Billy Cunningham and the like. We had a great team. We didn't beat the Celtics, but we won a lot of games, and that was a highlight. So I would guess that my whole career was a highlight because I felt so privileged to be in the NBA, to get paid for playing a game you like to play, and so I guess that could be it.
I got a trivia question for you. Who scored the first point in an NBA All-Star game?
Well, that's a good trivia question. I actually found out last year that I had scored the very first point, and then it was what do you call it? It was verified this year, and I was at the L.A. at the Staples Arena, and they did. Wasn't on national-wide TV, but they showed a picture of that, we had a little black and white movie that they did in those days. Nothing like the highlights of ESPN this era, and it was exciting to see that. And so to answer your question, yes, I scored the first basket.
And you also had a son who had an even longer NBA career than you did.
That's true. Danny played 18 years in the NBA, which is probably 10% of the players maybe played 8, probably closer to 5. 18 years, and he was you might say a role player. He played a lot of. He played his best ball with Denver. And did great work with Orlando and Milwaukee, and he was a real good team player and knew the game well, had great fundamental background, and surprised many people, especially in Syracuse, because at Syracuse, when he would play college ball, Jim Boeheim didn't play him for 3 years, and then his final year played him, and then he showed that he was a very good player, and I'm very proud of him. I think he actually played in more total games than I did, and he did play for 7 teams and 13 coaches. And don't ask me to name them because I'll probably make a mistake.
But he probably earned more than in 1 or 2 seasons than you did in your entire career.
Well, let's say not probably, he did. My total for 16 years. Of course, these are different eras and so on, different value of a dollar. But in my total career, my total dollars was maybe $300,000. That we're talking 16 years, maybe an average of $16,000 a year. And of course, the pros today, they're making, well, what they are making.
Millions and millions.
But not only that, but, even a guy like Bill Russell and Bob Cousy and Bob Pettit, they did well. I was in a much smaller market, so we didn't have the wherewithal to, but like if I averaged $15,000 to $20,000 a year, they average $30,000 to $40,000, and that's about it. Russell was making like 65, and then Chamberlain in the mid 60s, mid 60s, was paid $100,000 or so, he said, and then Russell beat that. So the first $100,000 player was only in 1965.
And Babe Ruth was making that back in the 1920s with the Yankees.
Well, I didn't know if he was, but I'm in the NBA. He was the 100,
right.
And that was considered amazing money. I mean, even baseball players weren't making much money in the 50s. I think Mickey Mantle in the mid 50s was making like $7,500. But it's all. It's wonderful that the players today could make that kind of money, and good luck to them. And then, in fact, this year they're having the owners are making a lot of waves. They're talking about lockout and all because the owners feel they're paying the players far too much money in long-term contracts, and they want. And I think that there will be a definite shakedown in the amount of money that the players will be making next year, unless they're locked in at this point, which some of them are, and they're rushing. Like Anthony, he rushed to make this deal because the money won't be there next year. I think that the owners are very, very adamant in making their plea, from what I hear.
What do you think about what Anthony did, what James did, what Bosch did? None of these guys want to play for small market teams. They want to go to the big teams and make the same amount of money that they would have with the other teams, but they knew there's more endorsement. Could you have seen yourself doing that back in the day, saying, I don't want to play where I'm playing. I want to go to Boston. I want to go to L.A. I want to go to one of the big markets.
Well, I never did. Regarding Bosch and James, and they never won a championship. They didn't win a championship where they were, and they felt winning a championship would be the cap of their career. So they felt that by loading up with Wade down there in Miami, and they got a big spiel from the owner, Mickey Arison and Pat Riley, and they fell for it hook, line, and sinker. And it's very probable that they're going to be very successful. Whether win championships or not, they should be in the top, at least in the quarterfinals or the semifinals of the NBA this year. Go deep into the playoffs, but there's 30 teams in the NBA and it's very competitive. So I thought James would made a terrible mistake. I think he should have tried to win the championship by him, with him as the key guy, or whatever. That's his business, and he's a pretty smart guy and a great player.
Yeah. Now, back in the day, you didn't have that option.
No, we never had the option.
You couldn't say, "I'm taking my talents to Fort Wayne. I'm taking my talents to Rochester, or wherever."
Back in the day, the player contract was such that they had what they called a reserve clause, and the reserve clause was never really tested in court, in the court of in a legal situation because I think players were just very pleased to be in baseball or football or basketball, especially basketball, playing something they love to do and being paid for it, and you could not go to any other team because the team you had reserve clause, and I think Oscar Robertson challenged it and paved the way for free agency, which made the salaries explode and the whole NBA explode. Free agency and salary cap were things that were never in our era, and we were tied to our teams. Period. But today, players have the option after a certain number of years to be free agents, and that's what's going on is absolutely amazing. These major trades and all that.
If you take the whole history of the NBA and you were running a team, if you could have one player to build your team around, past, present, who would it be?
Well, of course, that's a very tough question. I always felt that the greatest basketball player, we're talking about all-around player, pass, shoot, defend, rebound, was Oscar Robertson. I thought he controlled the game and his skills were amazing. But when you had the likes of Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell, you say, wow, you want to start a team with one of those guys, and then of course you have the likes of Bob Cousy and Bob Pettit and Jerry West, Elgin Baylor. Those guys I saw play and I played against them. I mean, but to me, today's players are incredibly athletic, much more athletic than we were. But to answer your question, I would probably say that the Wilt Chamberlain of his last few years was the guy who played team basketball would be the guy that to anchor a team around. Obviously, Russell won 11 championships, and Wilt maybe 2 or 3, but Wilt finally realized that to be a champ, he had to be more of a team player than an individual player.
Now, if you would put that Wilt late in his career on those Celtics teams, they still win the NBA championship.
Absolutely. And Wilt always said, even the years when the Celtics were winning all the championships, and I thought that was a little selfish of him, he said, well, I don't have the supporting cast that Bill Russell has. But he had some very good players with Philadelphia Warriors. He had Paul Arizin. He had some others that were excellent. But they came up all short. And then, of course, with the Sixers, we couldn't beat them. But finally, in 65, 66, they came up with this, one of the greatest teams of all time, with Wilt and Hal Greer and Billy Cunningham and Larry Costello and Chet Walker and Luke Jackson. I mean, that was a fantastic team, and that was arguably one of the best teams in the history of the game. Hello?
Hello. You'll get no argument. You'll get no argument here. Now, one person who doesn't really rise to a point of recognition is Maurice Stokes, who played for the Cincinnati Royals and died very young. Did you have an assessment of his skills? Well,
there's no doubt that had he completed his career as a normal player would have, and it was just a terrible blip that he had passed away, just a freak illness. He would have certainly been one of the top 50 players of all time, and probably because he was with Cincinnati, and then Oscar was with Cincinnati a little later on, that they would have won many championships with those two, because they would have complemented each other quite well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schayes, for your time. It was a pleasure talking with you.